changing needs of residents at entry into retirement villages means that they're often needing some supports right from day one. And home care, of course, has been in the spotlight because of the wait lists of 12 months or more. And in addition to that, the Royal Commission has put higher focus onto aged care. And with the Royal Commission's interim report having been released, and one of the three key immediate recommendations being to address the shortage of supply in home care packages. So, Paul, what opportunity does that create for you?
Well, for us, very much, I think the entire industry, but our own organisation has been saying for some time there needs to be more releases of packages. So the indication from the government that there will be further releases is sorely needed. But there's actually sort of been an ancillary approach that we've taken, which hasn't been a previous focus for us. So we've focused on government-funded packages, but we've actually had fairly spectacular growth in our fee-for-service, user pays.
Right.
To a certain extent, that allows us to control our own destiny, because we're not actually reliant on government funding and regulations, which can change, although it is a tougher sell. Once it's in, residents do see the value in it. It is hard from an affordability standpoint, though.
So what are the challenges then, and perhaps for smaller operators, in getting home supports in place, including supply and perhaps financial gaps, things like that?
Yeah. For a smaller operator, particularly with no background in delivery of home care, I don't think you want to underestimate the fixed costs that are very, very high in terms of service delivery. And with the current standards and the regulatory requirements, you really need to have a damn good quality team. Good processes, good systems behind you. That's all a cost, which for a small operator is really, really difficult.
Yes.
Where a smaller operator who doesn't have a background in care is probably better placed is to form a partnership with an organisation that does have those things already in place. It also means much quicker to get service delivery into residents than starting from scratch.
And of course, you've been doing this for a long time in your business.
Oh yes, so we've been doing it for almost 20 years now, and that's post various iterations of government funding. It sort of evolved from even a volunteering standpoint at one point. But yes, we've seen the move from block-funded to consumer-directed care packages, from the old home and community care program to Commonwealth Home Support Program, and every other change that has occurred in this space. And
Bev or Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to add to that with the supply or financial gaps that you've experienced? Or
just in terms of the gaps, I think it's no secret, the number of packages on a wait list in this country, whether people don't have one or they have one inadequate for their needs, is well in advance of the number of packages, like something like 120,000, but well in advance of the number of operational packages. So, that is one of the really big challenges in this sector, is just simply the supply of packages.
So I understand that at Southern Cross you've achieved a high home package penetration, but what role does the village manager have to play in that?
Village managers are critical, absolutely critical. If you think about it, someone is coming into your home to deliver a service directly to you. That is a very intimate relationship and requires a high degree of trust. Now, a new case manager coming along to meet a resident, there's no background, there's no history, there's no trust that has been developed. But village managers are talking to their residents every day. There is some implicit trust already in place. The role of a village manager is not to deliver care, in my view. It's more so to help coordinate care services to get in place, and to do that from a position of trust. It's somewhat similar to what Lynn was talking about earlier on in the first session.
Yes.
Where you have a medical concierge. Our village managers are not medical concierges, but they do work extremely closely with our home care division to get those services in place. Because it is a very, very intimate relationship, particularly when you're talking about care like personal care, for example, showering someone.
Yes.
Highly intimate. There needs to be that trust in place.
Great. And so perhaps to you, Bev, what changes are you and your team at Australian Unity observing in relation to customer expectations of care in retirement villages?
Look, we certainly noticed quite a shift in expectations. Not to say previous generations didn't have high expectations, but perhaps the more recent changes are around how well those expectations are being articulated to us, and an expectation of Australian Unity's role in facilitating those expectations. I think people continue to enter into retirement living as a preemptive move. They've often seen it as a reason to right-size to a smaller home. And so they're demonstrating a natural propensity to plan for the changes as they age, but I think we observe that they may not be as well informed on the care side, and particularly as some of the comments made earlier today around the preventative piece. So while there is a desire to plan, there is still a gap around, well, what should I be doing? And that covers everything from the changes in your nutritional needs as you age, what other types of services, right through to your care and clinical needs. So in the changes that we're embedding, it's very much around how you start to have that conversation from the beginning, right from the point of sale, as it were, so that there is a conversation around well-being and what sort of planning can be put in place to help prevent any decline or rehabilitation around some of the niggles that individuals might have.
So do you have a sense that people are starting to plan ahead more for their care needs, or are you finding that coming into the village, that's when they're really starting to think of it? How far in advance are people thinking these days of care needs?
I think there's certainly a sense of planning earlier for it. I think what happens though is once they interact with providers like ourselves, they get an opportunity to learn a lot more about what is available. And I think we've got to ensure that we aren't just talking to people around accommodation options, that we're actually opening up the full field of services for them so that they can actually make sure that they're getting the right services in a preventative way, so that their ageing experience is much better.
So what can Australian providers learn from the New Zealand counterparts? And I like asking that, of course. And how is Australian Unity getting ahead of the curve and offering consumers genuine alternatives to traditional retirement living and aged care models?
So at the risk of being beaten up over the gala dinner this evening, I think we still have a lot to learn from the New Zealand operators. I think that the Kiwi providers are still doing a number of things better than we are. My observation is that you tend to bring a simplicity to the consumer experience and make it a lot more seamless and a lot more certainty up front. In Australia, we know that we're juggling different legislative schemes, state by state, differences between retirement and aged care. I think the challenge for us is how we keep that complexity in the back end and don't have that impact on the consumer experience. So at Australian Unity, we're looking to simplify that customer journey and make it as seamless and well-informed as we can so that people are able to make choices that are well-informed along the way.
Right, yeah. So we'll keep the Australian and New Zealand differences there. I was mentioned not to ask about the rugby, so I'm sure Brett's probably not sitting too far away. He probably doesn't want me to talk about the rugby. But Jeff, what's Aveo hearing from its current and future residents about consumer expectations in retirement villages with care?
Really, the big thing in their minds is having those services delivered in their home. Right. One of the big challenges, so we kind of take for granted that that we as the operator kind of know the level of acuity of a lot of our residents, and there's a big challenge in that. A lot of our managers need to apply themselves more in that domain. And we also have this assumed level of knowledge that maybe they know the full extent of the services that are available, and often that's just not right at all. You know, getting on websites and trying to discuss, it's just enormously complex. And so one of the services that we have available as a team internally who actually help people go out and get their package or, increase the level of their package according to their requirements. But at the end of the day, they want it delivered in their home. What that means for us is we think about our communities as being roughly one of three sorts. So we have integrated communities that have got on-site care, and that's always a residential aged care facility, and sometimes will include a freedom facility. So that's one kind. Then we've got our freedom communities, in essence, the privately paid version of aged care. And then we've got our retirement living communities, I should say. And they're defined by the fact that they don't have on-site care, so we need to bring that in. And that's the real challenge, and that's where home care packages, they fit inside all of those models, but the real challenge is getting people aware of their rights and getting them a package and getting it in time.